Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Hey, awesome. So I see people are here from Germany, from India. I got people from Malta. Shout out to Alberta, Canada, Paris, Denver, Montreal. Hi from Toronto. We got lots of people here today. So I want to jump right into this. This is going to be hopefully a really interesting talk. And a really an exploration of how threat actors like what threat actors go through and on a psychological model, also on like a day-to-day of their lives because they're human and they do have the same hopes and fears as we do. So their moral compass and their ethics can be skewed, very skewed. But let's have a look at what we can see here and how they live. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a senior threat intelligence researcher and certified dark web investigator at Flare, if you don't know who I am. That QR code will bring you directly to my LinkedIn, and then from there we can basically start connecting and discuss this more if you want. I'm a huge cat mom. I love photography, and especially the photography on uh, like patterns and different types of textures and how shapes work together. That's the type of photography I love, and also landscape. I also am a huge astronomy nerd, especially like talking about theoretical like astrophysics. So talking about like dark matter and things like that. I'm a huge fan of that. Love listening to techno. And on my spare time, whenever I have that, I love to run. I love to play badminton during the summer, and I also play tennis. So this is really a psychological profile in 3 acts. So we're going to go and explore how these individuals in different tiers, in different ways, basically live their lives and how they can operate. So it's really an economy at scale. It's worth billions of dollars, but not everyone at every tier is making money, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of struggle at all of this at all the levels. So let's start with Act One, and to start the whole story, I want to take you back to um, a fabric and understand the underlying reasons why we're here today, or some of the reasons why we're here today. For example, there's this concept of the underground economy. There's second economy, the left hand, the nalevo, as we say in Russian, or this was a concept that was really, really strong and prevalent during the collapse of the Soviet, like the Soviet era. And what we want to look at is basically, again, this is not something that is exclusive to Russian speaking countries or Russian speaking threat actors. This second economy is prevalent everywhere. Every country has this type of economy. But I want to basically put a spotlight on the Soviet version of this because it does shape and it does introduce an interesting concept of like how we got here today, and why we're looking at like how things basically started back then, like in the late 80s and early 90s. And essentially, basically, we're seeing a mirror of the same economy today, but just in the digital realm. So, like, there was, during the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a lot of shortages. Now, and Russia was really, really a tough spot to be in because they had no money. They were completely bankrupt. And then basically, if you wanted like the whole joke of if you wanted a loaf of bread you had to line up, like that was a very much a reality back in the day. And I've for this talk, I've spoken to a lot of individuals who grew up in that era, and the stories that they were telling me was really, really touching. And so essentially, like, if you wanted anything, right, you weren't going to depend on the surrounding of the the government, or the social safety net that a lot of us are accustomed to, like, wasn't a thing, right? So you had to really depend on your brothers, on your sisters, figuratively and literally. You had to really be part of this secondhand economy, right? If you needed something, for example, for your factory, right? Like for your farming equipment or something like that, you needed it apart, you wouldn't go through the official means. You would basically go to your friend who worked in the factories to get that part. It wasn't something that, like, if you needed um something extra, if you wanted something extra, everything was done mostly through that market, right? So this second economy was basically how everything thrived. And this concept of credits, and this, because individuals were able to basically um ask and have this, like, social credit that essentially allowed them to accumulate different things, because, like, the money wasn't worth anything, and it wasn't necessarily a bartering system. So there was this idea and concept of, like, IOUs, and this, like, reputation that was growing within certain individuals, that allowed certain individuals to be able to enforce and to basically provide more, and get more, and basically dictate how things were shaping. So we were looking at everything. Like, everything is really interesting at this point. So it brings us to today, and this today, we're looking at some completely different generation with the same ideals, right? So, for example, the skids of today, or the kids, are growing up in an environment where they are exposed to basically a filterless version, cybercrime environment. They can get exposed to hackers on, or hacking content, or scamming content, or fraud content, basically through a whole different variety of platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. Basically, all the social media platforms allow young individuals to see this type of content, right? But not only is this the technical content that they're seeing, they're also seeing what could be the life that it could bring, right? And they're seeing the money, they're seeing the not necessarily just the clout that it could bring them, right? So they're seeing all of this, and they're seeing how much respect some individuals and some status that it brings them online, and this fake world that a lot of these individuals are creating outside of this fake world, because it's like those fake gurus that sell a lifestyle, and that is the product that you're buying. You thinking you're buying a course, but you're actually to learn how to become like them. But that whole platform, that whole thing is like, no, you actually have to become a fake guru to sell fake courses to basically influence people. So it's very much the same. And a lot of these, like, are clout chasers, and they're basically looking at leveraging their status of harming people, of hurting people, to build up on this clout. Now, where do the skids, like, so okay, so let's say they see some individual on TikTok, right? And then they're like, okay, so I see the money, I see the watches, I see the drugs, I see the girls, I see all of that stuff. It's also very much adjacent to the manosphere. And so they see all of this this lifestyle, and then they're like, okay, so with that, what do I need to do? So they get introduced to basically a Discord channel or a Signal channel or a Telegram channel, and then from there they're taught about the concept of downloading Stealer logs or looking, or the introduction of like learning some scripts, which is definitely the definition of script kiddies, right? So it's like, because a script kiddie is a script kid, or it's someone who isn't necessarily very good at hacking, but can basically just copy paste a script, execute the script, and basically that is hacking. It is sort of a form of hacking, but it is one of the lower tiers of hacking, right? It's not like a top tier pen tester. And we'll get to the affiliates and to the syndicate level in a bit. But we're starting off with the lowest level because right now we're seeing and we're going to get to this in a bit, where we're seeing a shortage, right, in the good affiliates, in the top tier affiliates, and because the old generation, the old guard, right, from the Conti days, from the Lockbit days, a lot of them have made their money, and a lot of them now have essentially retired or taking a pause for now to enjoy their money and enjoy their lives. So now we're seeing a lot of like younger folks get into this world, right? And get trapped in this world because not only are they learning to hack, right? They're also falling into the vicious cycle of extortion themselves, right? So this is where they're exposed psychologically to the fear that extorting someone can bring, right? They're not only exposed to the technical, like I said, of downloading all this stuff, but their brains are literally getting rewired because they are learning to hurt people, right? And this really goes into how this is not only just an economy and just a way. It is also very much a lifestyle. So a lot of this is happening from a bedroom, right? Or from a classroom, or from a computer lab, or from a cell phone, right? And like the different levels, it's not just necessarily ransomware that we're speaking about at this level, because this is where the general fraud ecosystem is getting introduced. So we're looking at, they're learning phishing, they're learning crypto scams, they're learning sextortion, and they're learning all of these things at this point, right? And these are all essentially tools of the trade. And the reason why they're doing this, now there has to be a reason, right? We are always looking for that reason of why are people going and doing this, right? Like, so one of the reasons, and this is basically a concept that was coined by Merton in 1936. And this is a concept called the strain theory. And the strain theory, basically, at its most fundamental reason, is someone snapping and someone going breaking bad, essentially. And some of the main reasons why, like, it has basically 5 pillars. There's conformity, there's innovation, there's ritualism, there's also retreatism, and there's rebellion. Now, I want to talk to you about like these concepts of why someone can essentially like commit these crimes, and this really applies to the younger generation and really to anyone. But why are you going down this path of essentially like breaking bad, or are you going down this path of exploring cybercrime? Now, conformity is when you're looking at, for example, the world around you, right? There's this box that everyone is in. You're looking at like everybody in your surrounding, in your society is doing things a certain way. You're forced to conform to something. You're feeling trapped, right? So you want to basically like buck the trend, or you want to get away from this conformity, right? This pressure to conform can lead you to basically going against the grain. There's also the idea of innovation, right? So innovation doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to be doing it the right way, right? So there's people who want to innovate, but then the sole fact of innovation is it like right? Is it wrong? Like there's a lot of interesting concepts of like the lack of innovation can push someone to basically do something that basically like so for example, when you have a business model or you want to basically create a RAS, like RAS is innovation, right? And it is constantly being innovated. Now, I'm going to skip ritualism just for now, but I want to basically talk about retreatism because that is one of the biggest ones I think is one of the biggest important concepts here. And retreatism is essentially the concept that if you cannot leave or you cannot basically get out of your current situation, of your like bad or shitty situation, if you have to be forced to conform, the lack of innovation, and you will rebel because you have to be able to retreat. So essentially, this is why we call vacations going to a retreat, right? You are able to escape your issues, and basically you are able to go and you're basically able to go and go somewhere else and distance yourself and disconnect from your hardships. So the idea that all of these things are happening makes you rebel, right? And if you are able to rebel, now that's why we have a lot of laws against like being able to protest and being able to do things is to, like at least able to vent and to get some stuff out and to but if you're not able to rebel, right, that will lead you to just the fact that you're not able to rebel. If anything is like the fact that you're going against that is rebellion, then that is considered crime. So there's a lot of reasons why people can go towards this strain, like they're feeling the strain of having to conform, having to no innovation and ritualism. Now, ritualism basically is the concept that everybody has these little rituals that we do every day, right? And if we can't, we're not allowed to do these rituals, right? Or these little rituals are harming us, then we will go against the buck, and we're going to essentially start looking at ways of going against the grain. Now, this is we're looking at now. Kids today, when they're looking at all of their lives, sometimes they're economically they're young and they want to make money, right? Because they want independence. They don't want to, they want the status. They want they want to innovate, right? They are seeking that entrepreneurial aspect of trying to create something, right? They want to rebel. Most of us had a rebellious teenage year, right? And these are the ways that, because it's so accessible, it's also very exotic, it's taboo. Individuals gravitate to this world, this seedy underbelly of the underground world, so that they can start exploring it. The problem with that is it is a vicious area, and it's vicious, and people will fall into this, and unfortunately will get caught up into some very, very bad people. And a lot of them don't even graduate to the higher tiers, right? Because this is literally a meat grinder at this point. And this whole world and these are basically, they think that they're going to become predators, but they become the prey at this level. So when they're going in at this level, right, they want to basically become they want the wealth, they want the clout, they want the status, but it really isn't meant for them sometimes, and they end up losing out on this level. So I sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but basically now that they're in this level, right, they're in the seedy underbelly of the ransomware operators, or just the frauds in the cybercrime world. This is where they learn the techniques from their peers. Not only are they learning the techniques, they're learning also to rationalize the crimes, right? And so this rationalization is basically helping them to cope. It's the same concept that when you go to prison, you come out a better criminal, right? Because you're going to be exposed to more criminals. You're going to be exposed to basically individuals who will pass on their ability to understand this. Now, this whole concept is basically known as um, uh, the apprenticeship of crime, and this is a concept that was coined by Sutherland in 1939, and basically it allows people to deal and to cope with the crimes that they're committing. Now, from Sutherland, the actual theory is called differential association theory, but basically the core idea of this is that you learn your criminal behavior, right? It's learned through your social interactions. And this is the crime that we're learning is learned online nowadays. It's learned also in the classrooms. It's learned in basically anywhere where people can basically exchange information. Now we can exchange criminal ideas, but the mechanisms of this is really what's like back in the day when this was like this coined, like the concept of the internet wasn't a thing, and like today we have the online anonymity or pseudo anonymity on top of this, right? And the ability that you don't need to get that you won't get touched, right, is a big indicator of fake protection, saying that I can do this, right? It's an allure, it's a veil that you're saying, oh, I can do this. So this ties into another theory, and this is called the neutralization theory. And essentially, this is all about denial, right? So the kids are basically taught that this doesn't hurt anybody because it's data, right? But if it does hurt people, right, they deserved it. And basically the people that are doing this as well is like, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm stealing from companies, right? Or I'm not necessarily hurting people. They have insurance. I'm stealing their data, and I'm hurting the company, and the company is bad, right? And they did it to us. They're corrupt, everything. So this is basically the neutralization theory. So when you apply all of these theories together, you get this concept of a completely dissociated individual who believes these things. And basically, you have to find a way to counteract these beliefs online. But the way online, what people are showing is it is so easy to radicalize individuals into this mindset of like get into cybercrime, that they're showing all of this thing, the money, they're showing the cars, they're showing the watches, they're showing the Bitcoin wallets. Like most of it, as we're going to see today, is only a select few that can pull this off, right? It's always a select few, right? There's only a select few of people. There's always a 1% and versus a whole bunch, versus the 99%. And most of us are the 99%. And so when we're looking at this, it's really fascinating to see how like kids can get swept up in this because they don't understand, they don't have the history, and they basically fall prey to this. Now, I really want to talk about the paranoia of all of this, because when you sign up you go into this world, right? You think you're signing up for I'm going to be able to stay anonymous and basically make money, or like if you have these tendencies towards like psychopathy or like sociopathy, like you can basically like say I'm going to be able to do something that I want to do, and these like narcissism tendencies. So you're basically going into this, and then the paranoia starts to seep in, because everything you do online, it leaves a trace, right? We all know this. Like there's a good mix of us in here that have a forensic background or have like some form of pen testing background. And when we are like doing anything, we can basically any connection or any handshake leaves a log, right? So the thing is like when you're first starting off as a skid, right, you don't have the best operational security. You're learning how to do this. So you are this is where everyone is vulnerable, right? And your past, it doesn't necessarily need to be within the that week, that month, that year. Like something that you did 2 3 years ago, the internet doesn't forget, and then it can come back and bite you. So what's fascinating to me is how individuals cope with this. And it's not just necessarily the paranoia uh, of like other like threat actors coming after you and trying to dox you. We've seen this very much within the community, especially the Dogspin community, especially like the breach forums community, especially the scattered spider and the comms community. Like it is a meat grinder in there. And so they also have to contend with the fact that law enforcement is after them. And if they've done enough to be on law enforcement's radar, we have to look at the fact that that they are going to be like distrustful of everyone, right? So they believed that they were going into this world where they're going to be able to have this support network, this alternate safety net, right? But unfortunately, that safety net wasn't real. And now they've got to contend with basically piranhas on both sides, and they're left alone. And this basically, how do these individuals live with this level of paranoia? So I want to look at a specific individual named Sevi. And Sevi basically was the one that reached out to VX Underground and basically said, hey, I'm part of the new chapter of the Scattered Lapsus Shiny Hunters group, and I'm communicating with them. I am one of their PR individuals, essentially, like professionally speaking. And I want to show you something. Contains flashing lights, so just heads up. But this is just basically like the queen of the comm, right? And so basically, when we're looking at this individual, Sevi, like she put herself out there, and how she copes with all this paranoia and the stress of being the front and the face of such a high profile group is essentially by drinking. And Sevi drinks a lot. And Sevi has basically said that she's an alcoholic. She struggles with it. She's said that she wants to quit drinking. But this is essentially like, and this is the stress and the factors that are being placed on someone, right? So a lot of these individuals turn to drugs to deal with the stress and the hardships and like the loneliness of this. Because if you can't even be friends with the peers that are in your environment, it's very lonely, right? And a lot of people want to, and this affects this affects your parasocial relationships especially, but this also affects all of your relationships on the outside, in the real world, where people are not, like, you're trying to make friends with people, but you don't know if they're law enforcement. You don't know if they're out to get you. Like the level of distrust in everything, it cannot be understated for this. So let's now talk about what comes after this. Like once you've passed the meat grinder of this stage, of the first stage, right, of the world of skids, and you've actually you were able to learn enough skills, you were able to learn how coping mechanisms, psychological coping mechanisms, and you've made some very, very few you have some very, very few trusted people, right? You can now start to operate. Again, the dangers of getting backstabbed are not gone. They're still very much there. But let's see what happens. And before we start Act 2, I just want to jump on this and I just want to look at to see if we have any questions. Let's just see a quick QA. Training in the chat. So this is a fantastic question. And this question is from Robert Tchaikovsky. Apologies if I mispronounced your last name. Basically, it says, is there a correlation with ADHD, abuse, being poor, and access to technology? I think that's a fascinating question because there very much is. Like, it's also education, right? And like we see, it's also like if you have access to the infrastructure around you and you have access to the technology around you to do this, you want to look at basically all of the data that's around you. And a lot of the times when we're on these chat rooms with these individuals and we're looking at it, like it is a common thread for them to discuss their mental disorders, like autism and ADHD, and it very much does like apply, like because you have some individuals who hyper focus and basically accumulate this like encyclopedic knowledge on specific things, and they have this ability to basically create projects really quickly, but then after that they move on to something else. Now, when they create these like leak sites or these communities or these forums and then they move on to something, like it leaves them vulnerable because a lot of these were built quickly, they were vibe coded, and then it basically like all collapses, right? So we see these like ups and downs in these forums sometimes. These individuals who aren't very like who want to be part of that community, who want to be at the top of that community, but just don't have the technical skills to get there. Now AI is helping us bridge that gap. The problem is that it's not like necessarily very good, right? So we're seeing a lot of these like forums pop up, go down. Infrastructure is very shaky. But at the end of the day, these individuals are just naive, right? And they're getting played by people who are taking advantage of them, right? Because it is very much like a pyramid scheme where you constantly need new bodies to come in so that you can basically fund your own extortions and your own crime. So let's move on to see if there's any other questions. Why is this window so slow, so tiny? That is weird. Apologies. I have like this much space to read a question right now. Actually, one second. Angela, can you remove that pin because I cannot see? There we go. Thank you so much. So Hamza says, always remember to route the connection via proxies and routers, just as we learned playing uplink and unlink, and in all the films shows to be anon. So yes, the concept, that's a technical skill, right? You learn that, right? But when you're first starting off, you don't necessarily know about Tor or I2P, or now we're seeing these more sophisticated ransomware groups using ICP and how to basically use the blockchain to decentralize their operations and their infrastructure. So, and we're definitely going to get to that a bit later. But it's fascinating that this is all something that you're taught. So like when you're first logging in, you're going to be logging in maybe with a VPN, right? Maybe you're just going to go clear web with like, maybe you're going to think that incognito is going to be protecting you, right? But the thing is like you get a dopamine rush, right? But the thing about dopamine rushes is that you always have to surpass yourself, right? It's like drugs. You have to like do more every time. You get desensitized. You become you have this like tolerance that you build, and then this tolerance basically makes you do more things, more extreme things, so that you can get that same rush. Now let's keep going to the next slide. So right now what we're looking at is we're looking at the affiliate, right? We're looking at the affiliate level, the next level, right? Now that you've gotten your tools, I want to show you, even though you think you've gone to the next stage and you're like potentially immune to getting caught up into something, I want to throw this concept, right, about the biorobot to you. And this is not a new concept, right? This is something that keeps happening. And this is from the 80s, the 90s, all of this happens. And I want to show you a clip from Adam Curtis, and the movie is called, well, it's really a TV show, and it's called Russia from 1985 to 1999. It's called Trauma Zone. Phenomenal documentary. And I want to show you just a short clip of this, basically, and to think about affiliates and how they are essentially biorobots. So we can basically watch this clip.
На трубу. Подлетаем к блоку.
Вы пойдете не вшестером, а вчетвером. Вот вам отводится 1 минута для того, чтобы решить следующую задачу. Вот посмотрите за своими товарищами, как они ускоренно передвигаются из этой амбразуры, поворачивают направо за вот это сооружение. В этом районе работ лежат блоки. Понятно? Квадратные такие блоки весом примерно по 40, по 50 килограмм. Норма на солдат 4 блока. 4 блока надо взять, вот они, видите, и бросить их в пропасть, в разрыв. Но близко нельзя подходить. Вот можно подойти к этому металлическому ограждению. Вот они правильно действуют, видите как? Правильно действуют. Правильно действуют. Понятно?
So that's now let's talk about that. Let's unpack that, because that is quite something. Ransomware as a service is designed, it has many different levels, but it's designed like a SaaS, software as a service. It's essentially a way to allow individuals to take software and a whole bunch of different tools most of the time now, and basically conduct their own attacks with them. Now, as we know, a lot of the top tier groups, like the top groups, aren't necessarily completely immune to basically state-sponsored ideas and alignments and like basically language. A fantastic researcher known as Anastasia Shevchenko basically says that a lot of these groups are following the language of these threat actors, right? The language of their home country. And this is reflected in how they're conducting their attacks, of who they're allowed to target, right? If they're allowed to, and how can they target certain industries, and which countries can they target. Like certain industries, basically they'll say we don't encrypt, we only steal. And sometimes they'll say we don't attack any countries. A lot of this is usually the BRICS nation, which is like essentially, it has been revised, but it started off as like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But a lot of these like countries, and then you have the CIS, which the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is like essentially the ex-Soviet bloc. So basically, like, don't target where you live, and you don't want to necessarily upset the people around you. But now I want to talk about the biorobots, because you have basically this warfare. This is literally warfare. And when we have this these tools that these individuals are creating to basically shut down entire companies. And if you look in 2021, right, there was, sorry, not 2021, but you had DarkSide, right? DarkSide was able to launch one of the most sophisticated attacks that crippled all of colonial pipelines and basically took out all of the fuel supply on the East Coast of the United States, right? And so the thing is like, you are in need of people, affiliates. They're known as affiliates or partners, right? But to basically work on your behalf, because the tools of this warfare can only go so far, right? And what we're looking at is basically they need people to bridge the gap to finish the attacks. So the tools can self-propagate. The tools can do a lot of damage by themselves, but they need people to push the buttons to basically to pivot, to exfiltrate. So affiliates really are the biorobots. And this is not something that's new. Like, as we saw, it's a concept of basically the machines couldn't do it, so we need people to do it. And this is a concept that really applies to today, with all the talk of AI and all the talk of people losing their jobs and everything. Like, Will Thomas on his latest podcast had a really interesting quote, which is, if artificial intelligence can replace your job, you should be scared, of course. But at the same time, it's like, we have pretty much been biorobots for a long time, doing something that machines can do. And this is only going to become more true, right? And the concept of these affiliates, and it reflects exactly into cybercrime, the concept of these biorobots and these affiliates basically being able to thrive. So when we're looking at, as a defenders, right, we're looking at not necessarily what can code do, and what can threat actors do, and how much automation can do, right? Because of course we want to defend against automation and what automation is capable of, because automation is more sophisticated every day. We also want to basically prepare and fight against the sophisticated and the intelligent individual who's able to really do something. We're not just defending against scripts. We're not just defending against individuals, against automation. We have to defend against these individuals, because these individuals are the ones that have the capabilities. But as I said earlier, affiliates are getting far and far and fewer. And because of that, campaigns are being run on forums and things like that. RIP ramp. Can I get an RIP ramp in the chat? I want to see that in the comment section. I will have to see that. Yes, thank you. RIP ramp, RIP ramp. Yeah. RIP ramp. Yeah, exactly. So, RIP ramp, and so like a lot of these like forums allowed for individuals to promote their services, to recruit their services, to recruit affiliates, those very rare and capable and talented pen testers who could actually conduct these attacks. But again, at the same time, like it's getting harder and harder, right? And companies are getting have more and more sophisticated means of defending themselves. Their security is more mature, which is amazing. We're doing a good job. We are actually doing a dent in this. We're doing good. But the threat actors are always trying to figure out something new, right? They're always trying to figure out a new way to get around all of this. And one of the ways that these threat actors are doing is like, now this is a little dated in terms of like this specific group is not around anymore. This is Van Helsing. But I wanted to show you that Van Helsing came up with an interesting idea to recruit more individuals to basically say, come work for me, come join my RAS. And I want to show you this. And this is really novel because they were really one of the first ones to sort of do this. And at least like polished like this, they had a really good video. So I want to show you this commercial. This is an actual advertisement by a ransomware group to say, come and join my group. So these groups are trying to recruit more people. And now this sort of allowed and sort of inspired more groups to follow suit. And like, for example, This Is Global, who also just recently announced that they were shutting down and they were selling their source code for $80,000. And that included the panel, the affiliate panel, the dashboard, the DLS, some of the infrastructure, and all of the source code for the lockers, which included like Linux lockers, NAS lockers, Windows lockers, ESXi lockers. So this is really interesting. Let me show you this one. So Global was able to create these videos and it was really trying to recruit more individuals. Again, but you can also think about like how expensive it is to create this. and also to host your own RAS. Like it's not cheap, right? You got to pay developers, or if you're a developer yourself, you got to feed yourself. You got to pay for the infrastructure. Like all of this is not cheap. Like you have to pay for hosting, you have to pay for bandwidth, you have to pay for storage, you have to pay for all of these things. But essentially, as someone pointing out in the comments, this is a great point. Basically these are targeted to the skids, to the affiliates that want to join, that are coming out of that skid tier, and they're basically learning to, like, because there is very much basically a decline in the sophisticated and the good affiliates. There are more affiliates than ever. There are more threat actors than ever, right? Don't get me wrong on that. But I'm talking about the good ones, right? The ones that have the skills to be able to pull off an absolute takedown on an entire, like, Fortune 500 company, like an enterprise. Like those are the individuals that I'm talking about. Those are the ones that are becoming less and less. And a lot of the times we see groups try to leverage big names by attacking like subsidiaries of a big name company in different countries or in different like localities, and basically saying like, hey, like we breached this big company, but it was a small subsidiary in on the other side of the world. So the idea is that a lot of these companies now, and we're doing good, as I said earlier, we are maturing, we're learning from these threat actors and how they're moving and how they're operating. So again, what I want to look at is these are really the recruitment, and this is how basically they're trying to get these individuals to come on board, right? And to conduct attacks using their software, right? Their malware, their ransomware. So when you're looking at like this type of stuff, you're looking at, for example, Anubis here, you're looking at Van Helsing, which is defunct, and then you're looking at Nova here. These groups like offer very lucrative like splits. Like Nova is 90-10. Basically, Anubis is like 85-15, and Van Helsing, right, was 80%, 80-20. Like if you're hitting someone and you're hitting like $100,000 or $200,000 and you get to take 80% of that, that's an incentive, right? And now going back to the strain theory, that a lot of the people that are geared towards this, right, have a condition in their lives where this makes sense, right? And the risk factor is worth it, right? Like unless you have some form of disorder where you cannot factor in like risk properly, and you have impulsivity, but most people will assess their risk and say like, hey, but also they're sort of blinded by the beaconing of the internet's anonymity, right? And that plays a role. And also people overshoot, because conducting the attack isn't the hard part. Cashing out is the hard part. And if you cannot launder your money properly, right? I showed a huge aspect of this with my previous talk called Cryptos. And you should definitely take a look at that. Basically, it's showing threat actors who want to basically have to launder their money and take out their money from their ransom payment. They have to mix it, they have to tumble it in a bunch of different mixers, they have to convert it, they have to go cross-chain, and they have to try to find a way to convert their crypto to fiat. And they have to find people that are willing to cross state lines or cross country lines to be able to deliver them the cash, right? And not everybody is good at laundering money, because laundering money is a whole different world. You need the cooperation of like on the ground organized crime, a local organized crime, to be able to pull this off, right? And not a lot of people have the ability to start up shell companies or to be able to start up and have the facilitations and the connections to be able in the real world to do that money laundering part. Like a lot of the time, you end up having individuals, and we see this a lot with the younger crowd who sit on a bunch of crypto, right? And these are ill-gotten crypto, and they're gambling it on gambling sites, or they're basically buying usernames and things like that. They're trying to launder it in different ways, but converting it to actual fiat, right, is extremely difficult, right? It's not impossible. Lots of people do it, but it's one of the most challenging aspects of this whole operation. And so now going back to this affiliate model, right? You have the ability now to conduct an attack, and you can basically figure all of this out. But now what we're trying to look at is what happens next, right? And what I want to show you is this is a really interesting concept, because I'm going to leave this Russian version. I have the English version coming up next, translated. But for those who can actually read Russian, here you go. But essentially, like I said, this is a concept that's we're struggling with. And like the threat actors right now are Mike Melton. This is the operator of Chaos Ransomware Group. And Chaos Ransomware Group has some lineage tied to like the ex-Conti teams loosely, either through, depending on which side of the branch family you look at, it could either be coming from Black Suit, from the Royal family, or from the Black Basta family. There's been different like pieces, different publications to suggest both. But basically the idea is that when you're a new affiliate and you're going into these ransomware groups, right, and you're able to secure your first payment, right, and your first ransom, you'll take the lowest potential offer that you can get. Now, I did a LinkedIn presentation about like a couple of weeks ago, showing a group called Warlock, and they were started off their ransom at 3.5 Bitcoin, and the victim basically said, like, we cannot pay 3.5 Bitcoin, 3.5 Bitcoin. We need you to negotiate with us. We need you to work with us. And they were able to work Warlock down, right, by offering like 0.2 first, and then working and then doing 0.4, but basically going all the way up to 0.5. So they were able to reduce their whole payment from 3.5 to 0.5 Bitcoin, right? And that is a significant drop. And basically Chaos points to this as well. And here's the English version. So essentially Chaos is saying that these new affiliates are taking the payments they're too low, right? The ransom payments are too low. They're taking 10, they're taking 20, they're taking 50K. And the thing is like this impacts the group because a lot of the negotiation firms and the insurance companies talk, right? They're all very much interlinked together. They all, of course they do. Like these incident response firms, basically are pros at dealing with this, and they know that essentially if you can mark down chaos down to a certain number, they can basically label this whole and say like, hey, like I dealt with you in the past, or I know I can bring you down. And so that brings a lot of pressure on these threat actors, right? So Chaos here is saying that they don't allow affiliates to take less than $200,000 for their ransom, right? And this is not a new problem. Lockbit had the exact same problem all the way back in 2023, right? When you're an affiliate model and your goal is to try, like you're trying to make money off of this, and your whole, like there's a risk factor, right? Will you be taking 10, 20, 30, $50,000, which could be a life-changing amount of money for an affiliate living in conditions, right? Strenuous conditions. This could be what they want, but for you as a Chaos, as a ransomware operator, like it's really not enough for you, right? And these big ransomware groups, like we're looking at, like for example, Lockbit was documented to have made almost $100 million, right? So like at least that's what they had in their as a cut from their side of the operation. And so this puts a lot of pressure on everybody, right, to ask for more, but companies and these firms that are very smart can knock you down quite a bit. So this is really good news. So the thing is that even at this stage, you have paranoia, right? Even at this stage, you are trying to figure out, am I part of a honeypot? Am I part of a like, even if you're the operator, are my affiliates the honeypot? Like, are they researchers? We see this all the time, right? Where individuals are saying like, oh, we absolutely we like when we're trying to do infiltration and things like that into groups, these operators are very wary of researchers. They're very wary of law enforcement or feds, as they call them. And we're looking at basically this reality, right? Of like, and also there's the whole concept of who controls the wallet. And this is a concept that, for example, Cryo has been really good at, but we'll get to that in a bit. But essentially, like, when you organize your payment for that 80-20 split or whatever, that ransom payment, the victim will make a payment into a wallet, and then the wallet, who controls that initial wallet, right? Because there's the risk that as an affiliate that the ransomware group can basically exit scam, right? And just pull out and run away with the money. So a lot of the times you'll see sometimes where affiliates will be able to put in their wallet up front, and or they'll basically say, this is the wallet and this is my wallet. But most of the time it's the ransomware group will control the initial payment, and then they'll give the affiliate their cut. Now, some groups, again, as a way to attract more talent, they're saying we can also do an initial mixing of the coins before we pay you, which can be an attractive prospect. We've seen that with some of the groups. And the thing is that you can trust that, or some other groups, but then you lose a bit of money. But at the same time, it's convenience. Or do you try to take all the money up front? So before we get to Act 3, I want to go and take a quick look at the chat here and see if there's any questions. Okay, so this is a really interesting question. This comes from Cody Keppen. Do you think a lot of this comes from social techno norms being so new? And are there no rituals or true virtues to be passed down to the young on how to act on the internet? That is a fantastic question. Thank you very much for sending that. So I think the internet, right, when it first started, right, it was meant, and this is like, you can go all the way back to what the EEF was trying to do, the electronic frontier groups were trying to do. And like this was very much the wave of the anarchist mindset of like, there are no rules. This is going to be like a completely different way of operation. We don't have to listen to the man, right? you can watch another fantastic documentary by Adam Curtis on this called "Can't Get You Out of My Head," and that is a 5-part documentary, and it does dig into this. There's also Hypernormalization by Adam Curtis, which touches on this as well, and basically explains like that. But I want to just discuss that concept of like heritage, right, on the internet, where there is not really a heritage. Every generation has their memes. Every generation has their platforms and their content, and like we have our protocols, we have our way of doing things, and everything gets built on top of each other, right? But the like I find it a fascinating concept of like there's the concept of like what can you pass down to people as when we are working towards like a way of like owning less things, right? Where like things become more subscription based. Like, do you pass down subscriptions, which feels a little dystopian, or people are passing down like Steam libraries? People are passing down like their accounts now as a form of heritage. But I think it's a fascinating concept because like the internet doesn't forget, but a lot of the internet is forgotten, if that's an interesting fact. And so I look at that and I'm like how can we build on the lessons that we have learned and that we so we can share with other generations to not do this. Like there's of course there's the basics of like even the language is different. Like when I was growing up, I was in the chat rooms, it was all about like ASL. But like now that is not necessarily a thing to do anymore, right? So it's a fascinating concept. Thank you very much, Cody, for that question. So I want to address one more question before we go on to the next section, and this comes from Gerald Oger. Sorry. So this is it says the question is from first segment. So feel free to ignore. I wonder why the first level can't level up to the next tier. Is it through lack of development or the top tier actors don't allow them to access the development opportunities? Now, so look at it from a professional aspect. How many people can you realistically mentor throughout your life, right? And you can write, like threat actors are publishing information. Like look at Bastard or AKA Fisheye, for example. They published a very well-known how-to on attacking as a ransomware affiliate and a ransomware operator attacking companies through these manuals, these ransomware manuals, and there's volume 1 and volume 2. If you want a copy, let me know, and you can do so on Discord on the Flare Academy channel, and let me know and I'll drop some copies there. But these PDFs are dated, right? Because it's a medium that doesn't update, and you have to maintain this constant information to be updated. Because like when Bastard wrote the manuals, they were good for 2021, and then he wrote the next version in 2023, January 2023. And those are interesting, and they were basically like a follow-up to each other. But that's a lot of effort, right? And this is something that has to be funded, and this is knowledge that has to be transferred. And there are groups, so like for example, there's a website forum that Killen was part of, right? And Killen was on this was funding this forum. It's not Ramp, it was another one. And they were funding this forum through advertisements, through helping with moderation and things like that. And they were actively teaching the younger generation on how to do certain things, like how to set up secure messaging, and how to set up secure servers, and how to deploy panels and things like that. Like, they were actively teaching. The thing is also, like, it's a return on investment. Like, how much time and effort do you want to put into mentoring these individuals in a younger generation, so that you can actually start like making money, right? You can only do so much for free before you need to reconsider your business model. All of this is a business model, right? And you're leveraging people on a commission-only basis, right? And no one's making money unless some ransom is paid, right? So it's, and then only like the really big groups, like for example, like Black Basta and Conti, like at their peak, the people in there had a salary, right? The top level people had a salary, but like, this is only because they were able to receive payments. And we'll look at the syndicate level next. Act 3 is all about the syndicate level. So that's a really good question. Thank you. I'm just going to look one more. We have time, so I just want to look at another question here. Okay, so Wells Fargo has an interesting question here. It's what is the point of threat groups to repost old data or reuse the same data that is breached every time to try to advertise all the time? That is an interesting question. I call that repacking or reposting, same thing. So think of it, there's two reasons. There's from a data hoarder, digital archiver mentality. And then there's also the I am building a reputation and I have data. And a lot of the times when you repost something, like it can show, like, do people really know what they have access to? Because like, does the person that is putting that data up, do they know that that's already been reposted or that's been leaked? Like, it could be that they came across it and they're like, oh, I believe this is new and I'll post it. Or they were scammed into buying a piece of data that was previously breached, right? Because scammers will scam each other, and fraudsters and thieves will all, there's no honor amongst thieves at this level. And so they probably don't know what they have. And if they do know, they probably are trying to also not necessarily re-extort the victim, right? It's really more about like, hey, I have this data set. I am putting it up there because there's no, it's like a repost or a repack. If you look at the piracy world, like when something is no longer available, people will request it, and then people can bring it back online and seed it, or this. I'm talking about like the private torrent trackers and the private or the Usenet community, where you basically like can repost something if you ask for it, and you can pay through. You can in exchange for not necessarily crypto, but sometimes it is crypto, but it's also like forum credits or other things. And so the idea that like when you're putting up all of this information there, you're not necessarily trying to re-extort the victim, right? Most of the time you're just sharing this information, and like a completist or an archivist in terms of like putting that data up there to the community. You're supplying the community and not necessarily trying to harm the victim. I think if that's the idea, that's at least how I understand of it. But yeah, that's a great question. Perfect. So the question is, well, a follow-up question from Wells Fargo is, do they have that much available storage? Now, as I mentioned, storage is expensive, right? And if you look at, for example, right now, breach forums, breachforums.bf, they are offering a CDN, and the Shiny Hunters DLS is hosting all of their leaked data. So like all the victims right now that range in different sizes are like .7 zips, and they are hosted, like the biggest one is right now is 30 gigabytes. And that is hosted on the Breach Forums CDN. So when you click on it on the DLS, you can download it right away. But you can also just copy that link, put it into a download manager or a wget script, and you can download it extremely fast. I was able to peak at, for example, 50 megabytes per second, 50 Mbps, and that was impressive. But again, that costs money, right? And the more they have to pay, the more expensive things get. And they like, we all know what hosting costs, or have an idea of what it costs, and they're not immune to this, right? And the more we fund them, the more they can operate. So, and I know sometimes it's not an option to fund and you have to pay, but like, that's why it is like, funding cybercrime only facilitates it. Great question. Okay, so let's go and have a look at Act 3 now. So we're going to talk about the syndicate level now. And some of you are like, oh, that's where the title comes from. So the syndicate level is very interesting, because now we get to see from the very, very top, and we're going to look down now, and we're going to see how things operate. A lot of these top groups, once they have, and I alluded to this, once the top groups are basically they've made enough money, they can operate and they can run offices. They very much operate like a corporation, and they very much operate like a business. They have HR, they have managers, they have people that are in charge of negotiations, they have public relations, they have developers, they have maintainers, they have pen testers, red teamers. They have everything. They have everything, right? And it's extremely well structured, right? So what's fascinating here is, at the very, very top, right, you are running this criminal enterprise, right? You have the paranoia from all of the lower levels, right? And I also want to say that, like, going up and growing up, the world has, like, it's an interesting concept to say, but the world has very much different internets, right? We have like the Western American internets, where a lot of us are familiar with it, because that's where a lot of the big like platforms are coming from. But like, China has its own completely different internet, right? And like Russia has its own, or Russian speaking internet is completely different, right? So it's hard to, as someone from an outsider, like going from Western to the Russian sphere, or the Russian speaking internets, and then, or going to the Chinese speaking internet, like, that is a challenge, right? And now there's the concept of, with current political, current political situation, we might very well see, and we're already starting to see because of GDPR, that was basically the start, a European internet, right? So we might end up this whole thing with like 4 internets, right? Or then maybe like 4.5. But it's basically, that's going to be a really interesting concept of like these different types of internets with different types of rules and different types of like operations, and how all of these criminals, are they going to like operate within their own bubbles, or are they going to and then on top of that, you layer the concept of like CIS, and you layer on top of the concepts of like BRICS, and like how all of these like geopolitics interact with basically the socioeconomic levels of the internet. And so that's going to be something that I want to explore, and we can definitely take a look at. So, Chem J has a fantastic question here. what's your opinion on Klopp's current campaign? Is there info that you're using GladNet as the initial access vector, or are they posting their victims from Oracle EBS? So right now, I believe they've moved on from their Oracle EBS from my last they finished their campaign. So one way that historically has been sort of accurate for Klopp is in like monitoring their campaign is when they create archive pages. So when they created archive 11, I believe it was, that was I want to say that was the end of the Oracle EBS. And now they've migrated to their next campaign. I've heard rumblings of it being GladNet, but there's also different campaigns that they've started. And this is basically an interesting one because Klopp has been on a tear recently. And what's interesting is that typically between these massive campaigns that they do, they've been able to take breaks, right? So like Move It, Go Anywhere, Clio, and they were able to especially Move It because that was their most profitable. It was estimated that they made millions of dollars off of that campaign in 2023. But now with like OEBS and the other one, they're and this one ClearNet. So there's three right now back to back. They are basically changing their script, and they're attacking. They're publishing a lot of victims. Now, just the Oracle EBS data, which I was able to study, that was about 100, close to 100 terabytes of data. And if you're thinking of it, like how does someone leak 100 terabytes of data, right? First of all, securely, right? And by securely, I mean being able to offer it in a way that they don't get arrested, right? But at the same time, it's all about the ability to establish your threat. So if you cannot leak data effectively, you don't have a threat. So Klopp has been one of the best at doing this, and they are the most effective, I believe, at leaking data. Their data has always been quick to obtain. It's efficient and it's effective. Like before these campaigns, they were offering everything through Tor, and you can use like a download manager to just download all the parts, and it was quick. Now they're offering everything through BitTorrent, and everything is split up over 3 servers, and these servers are all hosted in Bulgaria. And these basically are these massive like servers that are hosting like all of their most recent campaigns. There are 3 recent campaigns. So these servers, what I was able to do is I was able to look at the IPs and find out the host provider and look at the plans of that hosting provider and look at what type of like cost. And each server is about $400 a month, right? So like right now with 3 servers of, let's say 100 terabytes, and is like, that's at least $1,200 USD per month, right? In terms of hosting, that like, so you got to recoup those costs. But they've made millions on Move It, right? Allegedly, if you follow some of like the chain analysis research that was published back then in 2023. So it's like they can do this. They have the infrastructure and they have the threat, and so it is a very Klopp is very interesting. Like that is a successful, like quote unquote successful group that is able to create their threat and basically to leverage that. Thank you, Kemp, for that. Let's go back. So when you're at the top of the game and you're creating these infrastructure and everything trickles down from you. So like, let's look at Lockbit, for example. Lockbit had a leak, right, in terms of their source code, or essentially their builder, that allowed individuals to create the cryptographically paired encryptor and decryptor. And that allowed people to start their whole operation. For example, for those of you who don't really remember or didn't know, that is how DragonForce started. DragonForce started with a copy of the LeakLockBit Black Builder, and they were originally posting the data on the original breach forums during the Pom Pom Purin era. And that was essentially like, they didn't have a DLS. They basically had a unique file server or a unique page, like an onion page for each of their victim, right? And that's how they were posting that link. They were using breach forums as their DLS until they basically came out with their own DLS. And then once they had enough money, they were able to pivot from using the LeakLockBit Black Builder into using their own code now that they've completely, like, they haven't used it for years, right? But they're using all their own stuff now. But this is that was really the fascination of like a group like evolving over time as they got more funding and they were able to extort more individuals and get more ransom payments. And like you can see like the snowball effect that it has, right? That like because like and the concept of this and like how we're fighting cybercrime and especially ransomware, and it's an interesting fight because like you could do your best as an individual, a victim, right? And you can have the most meaningful conversations with your legal team of like, we're not going to fund this, we're not going to pay this ransom, and we have the means of recovering, right? But like you have no control, and like even like authorities and government officials do not have the ability to control what all the other players do on different jurisdictions, right? So like when the U.S. government says they're highly considering like banning ransomware payments, or like Australia, who basically came out publicly and saying that they're not going to be paying ransom payments anymore. After their healthcare sector got targeted, it has to be a collective shut off of the tap. It can't be like, if there's enough trickles, it will still snowball, right? So it's a fascinating concept that I keep looking at. Ray says it's getting more difficult to thwart these guys since they are now incorporating AI to look for zero-day vulnerabilities and to automate their attacks to make the detection time for an infection much shorter. Yeah, AI speeds everything up. It's a big challenge because, but again, quality is not, right now at least, we're not associating quality with AI. What we're associating with AI is speed, right? And AI is really just the average, like the median average of things. Like the definition of the content that comes out of like the reason why AI is not good, or the code from AI is not good and stuff like that, because it's literally statistically the median of something, right? This is the most probable thing that will happen, because it's a statistical and probabilistic model, at least the AIs that we're using, the LLMs, to basically say like, this is most likely what you want and give you that output. And by definition, that is an average, right? So it is average. So I'm not too worried about that. It's not great. And that's why we as people should look at AI in that sense and have some confidence in knowing that like we can be better than AI, at least at this point. And we know AI is only going to get better. That's the thing. As more data gets aggregated into AI, that ability to move that average towards the better and better and better position and better outcomes is only going to happen. But like how right now we're still using like the GPT, which is the procedural text model, and that's been around since 2017. It's not necessarily revolutionary right now. All we're doing is we're feeding more data to it. and we're spending more on infrastructure, data centers, and energy to basically process bigger chunks of data. So so we're not necessarily gonna we're still able to craft goods, better stuff, right? So I think that's what we have to find solace in, and it's basically the ability that we can still make things that are much better and not settle for the average that the AI is doing. But for example, what I want to get back to, Ray, and that's a great point, is that it's speed right now. They're able to put out code and find things that are low-hanging fruit and good enough code to attack us. And I think it's a wake-up call for us to also just level up, skill up, and to start learning things and become students again. And not necessarily we have a competitor on the internet now. It's the AI, and it's out there. It's always learning, and I don't want to necessarily lead everyone to burnout, but we have to find solace that we are going to be better, and we have the ability to be better. Is basically what I'm getting at. All right, so what I want to talk about now is a specific individual, and I also want to shout out to one of my colleagues, Oleg, for this. Oleg has been instrumental in sharing his data and his research on this. So huge shout out to Oleg on this, but thank you very much. And so I want to look and explore a specific individual, specifically Tramp. Now, recently, BKA has officially named an individual as Tramp, and that is Oleg. I can't pronounce his last name right now. It's escaping me. I apologize. But essentially, Oleg, not my colleague, this is another individual, has been able to basically create an empire on this whole RAS model, right? And this individual has been connected to Conti, and then when Conti broke up in 2022, because of the at the time Conti was sided with Russia during the initial war with Ukraine. The Ukrainians that were part of Conti did not like that. So individuals from the Conti leaked all the source code. We all know that story. And essentially, Oleg was part of that. Tramp was part of that, of Conti, and started off his own team. There was Conti Team 1, Conti Team 2, Conti Team 3, and then from there we had a whole bunch of different lineages come out. Depending on the research that you read, we can see there's loose affiliations and loose lineages of Akira going back to there, Royal and Zion, Quantum, and Black Basta, for example, all have their lineage towards their Karakut as well. And they all had their own flavors, and they all had their own interesting concepts of different approaches to the business model and how they were approaching things. Karakut was only focused on trying to do extortion, and a lot of groups now are battling the biggest age-old concept of, do we encrypt? Is it what's worth more on ROI? Is it look at Clop right now. Clop is doing purely exfiltration. They're no longer locking systems. We can't necessarily call Clop a ransomware group at this point anymore, because all their previous campaigns, bar one or two victims in the here or there, have been a part of these massive file server exfiltration campaigns. So they develop and they put their resources in finding file servers that have vulnerabilities that they can exploit, and basically funding these exploits. And basically that's their campaign now. We're looking at different groups now that pour their money into their lockers, right? Because the whole concept of if you have a really good locker that can reliably encrypt and decrypt, that you offload the cost of hosting the data onto the victim. So they have to keep all of that data. And basically, a lot of people would love to just do single extortion, which is the locker, because you don't have to deal with data. You don't have to pay for data. You just have to give back the locker, right? So in a perfect world, that would be great. But a lot of the times, the ransomware that gets pushed out there like have issues. We just saw in a recent article that was basically published by Heliasion, saying that Sicari was having issues and it was vibe coded because it couldn't handle large files. And we've seen this with other ransomware operations before, even before the age of AI, where like a lot of the files, the decryption would happen on like these massive like hypervisor files, like the VM flats and the stuff like that. Like they would just fail because the files were too big. And like again, like when you're in the middle of an attack and you're doing incident response and you see ransomware actively encrypting your environment, like you have to come to the realization and you have to make a decision, and an executive decision of, are you going to stop the encryption or are you going to let the encryption go? I want to see what the chat says. Do you think you stop the encryption or do you let the attack finish? Because I want to know what you think. Yeah, it depends on how far along it is. If you stop it, would you be able to decrypt it? Because the encryption didn't finish. So you have a partially encrypted file. Interesting. Yeah. TJ Williams, I was on the stop train until you said that. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the times, like you should let the encryption finish, right? Because you want to basically be able to finish, to be able to successfully decrypt, right? Because if you stop something and it was like, let's say the file, because a lot of different ransomware has different ways of encrypting data. So they have like partial fast, which is sometimes just the header, and partial, it will be like an intermediate encryption of like at a specific byte order, or sometimes you'll have different ransomware that will just like do a full encryption. And if it's programmed and the threat actor said, I want to do a full encryption, and it goes halfway through the file, like you'll never be able to recover that file. Like that is basically a wiper at that point. So and then there's the thing is, like, if these are encrypting your databases, your MySQL databases, and they weren't shut down, right? You're just corrupting data at that point. So it's really, really difficult. It's a decision that you have to make. So let's go back to our conversation here. And again, shout out to Oleg Lipko on this. This has been invaluable work. And basically, I want to, we're going to zoom in on these areas, but this is the Syndicate overview of a company overview, or literally a business org chart of Black Basta. And this is how these threat actors are operating, right? And they have strict roles. They have managers. They have people that are looking over them, and they're able to essentially conduct their business, right? And from there, we have people who go under multiple different pseudonyms, and they're able to. They have offices, and they're basically able to conduct their business. So right now, like, let's take a look at this specific scene right here. You have the internal team, which was the team that was responsible for pen testing. They were able to do the ransomware deployment, and they were support. Now, they had a different nomenclature and a different syntax for how they were named, and everything here is hosted on a Matrix server. This was the Matrix leak that happened last year. So from there, we can see that, like, we have like threat actors named NN, ZZ, FF, TT, and JJ, DD. And from there, we have the initial access brokers. Now, these are the external affiliates, right? And they're also could be the ones that do like some pen testing and things like that. But these users, like Black Basta was a closed group, right? And they were basically the ones that were you had to be invited into it. You had to know the people that were into it. They weren't necessarily full, like advertising super openly on forums. They were present on forums, but they weren't necessarily like creating those recruitment adverts that we're used to seeing from other ransomware operations like Anubis and the ones that we saw earlier. But now that we see that they have like the separation of like their dealings with like initial access brokers and they're dealing with their internal team, we can see that basically there's also these whole other sorry. There's these other tier of affiliates that actually don't know they were working for a RAS. And we're going to see that. There was actually some dialers. And we're going to take a look at Arslan. Arslan was this individual. He was allegedly from Pakistan. And he was working for roughly $20 a week. And he was dialing all the victims that to make sure that and these were dialers that he was doing through Microsoft Teams, and he was also doing it through Skype. He was also doing it through different means like the old school telephone to make sure that I apologize. Okay, much better. Basically, going through all of these dialings and these victims like a Rolodex and a spreadsheet to see who, if the information was accurate, and to see who the victims were able to target. So going back to this idea, this is Arslan's spreadsheet. Now, in the data set that Black Basta was able to leak, we saw this information, right? And all of these links, even though they were dated from 2024, they were still active, right? And we still saw how people would recently log in, and Arslan was still actively trying to participate. And there was a really funny message where Arslan was basically, through a message on these spreadsheets, was saying, "Hey, hi, I'm available for more work. Please contact me." But they were basically like, these threat actors are not like, it's a challenge, right? They're trying to they believe they're working for a legitimate company, right? And sometimes you have these threat actors who are not these threat actors, but these individuals are a little bit smarter or able to realize earlier, I think it would be a fairer assessment to say, that they're working for a criminal enterprise. And they basically, because there was another individual who was more technically sound and more technically advanced and was able to do the actual testing of the credentials, and they realized fairly quickly that they were working for a RAS. And so there's different levels to this, right? But I want to finish off this talk with Evil Corp. And Evil Corp is really a family business. Now, a lot of this data comes from the NCA, and a lot of this comes from the Operation Kronos Part 2 that they did. So I want to take a look at this. And a lot of these individuals are sanctioned. And I want to ask the group, the chat, when you're making a payment and when you're trying to facilitate a payment, how important is it to check, I'm just going to name drop it like this, how important is it to check OFAC? OFAC. Yeah, exactly. So you want to know if you're about to make a payment to a sanctioned entity, right? Because that could put you into a whole bunch of trouble. So a lot of these individuals are sanctioned. And for example, Igor, this individual right here, in the middle of the image here. When I was in Munich and I was going through passport control, and I saw a wanted poster, right, of them, and they're still actively to this day, like, being chased down by law enforcement, right? They cannot go to Europe. They cannot go, at least with this identity, right? And we've seen some individuals go through radical changes like plastic surgery and things like that, and fake identities, fake passports. But it's a fascinating world at this point where they cannot even like move through. They have to stay in their country at this point, right? Because they're absolutely wanted everywhere. So let's take a quick look at this and dive into the syndicate level affiliates and how they live their lives. And this is Maxime right here. And he is basically the one that attacked Australia, and that's why he's sanctioned in Australia for that medical. And this has a lot, like Evil Corp has a lot of like overlap with like TrickBot and IceBot and IceID and QuackBot and all these things. So there's a lot of developers, malware developers, but like there's a lot of merging with different like Conti brands and different like groups here. But essentially, we can start to see this here.
Снова я, это ожидал. Почему хуракан вдруг дал экватора полный вперед? Еще он поставит новый выход, и сейчас мы проверим, как он работает.
700 кэсов улетели, и все.
Все, устала. Оп, кто там пришел? Кто пришел там? Кто там?
Don't worry, the tiger does not get hurt. At least in the video.
Все, ложись, баиньки.
Хорошо, когда братишка на гелике есть.
So I want to end this talk today with a specific question. And that question is basically, what happens when threat actors stop believing in this structure? And I am fascinated with what you all think of this. Like, what happens when, and we're starting to see this with crypto, with like cryo, sorry, where they're moving away from this world of trying to establish trust, and they're using cryptography and zero trust now. And it's a fascinating evolution. But I want to know what else do you think? What happens to threat actors when they stop believing in this power structure of like going through like leveling up through the different stages and learning and grinding your way, or is this just like a rites of passage thing, or is this just like how like people are human and this is how they live their lives? I want to know more. I want to know what y'all think of this. And let's have a look at some questions here. So with the proliferation of scammers and honeypots in cybercrime, how does an entry-level threat intelligence analyst identify a true starting point to monitor the real threat actors? So if you're getting into threat intelligence, the way I see threat intelligence, right, it's a multidisciplinary like career where the more you know about different things, I believe the more successful you'll be. And you definitely want to know like how to read the MITRE framework. You definitely want to know how to look at IOCs. You definitely want to know all of that stuff. But also you want to look at the socio like the reasons why people, the psychology. You want to look at the geopolitics of things, what's allowing people to do this, what frameworks and circumstances people do things like this. This also is extremely important. And there's like threat intelligence is all a big thing. And what I would recommend to you is basically do like pick a subject that fascinates you and you're extremely passionate about, because your passion will drive you, right? And find that that topic. For me, it's ransomware. It could be DDoS, it could be cybercrime, it could be extortion, it could be a whole bunch of different things, and like start learning it up on it. There's a lot of lore that happened in the yesteryears of before you started your career. Read up on the past. When I tell people who want to get into ransomware and learn threat intelligence from the ransomware aspect, the first thing I tell them to do is learn about WannaCry and learn how that basically started. Learn about the old ransomware, and then migrate to reading about Lockbit. And then you have the background, because you'll spend potentially a couple of months learning all about that stuff. And that's going to give you a decent foundation on a whole bunch of different topics. Or it could take you even longer, depending on how deep you go and how much research you want to do. But like that is how you would essentially start. And if you're just starting as a junior analyst, I would say read up on the lore of the groups that happened prior, because all of the groups today like come from like are standing on the shoulders of these other groups, and they've learned the refinement of their tactics and their techniques and their procedures are only possible because other groups have tried different things and have failed, have caught, so have been seized. So that's how you learn. Do they have a blue team for threat actors? April M says, so that's an interesting one, because the Lockbit had a bounty program for the longest time. And even though that failed to defend against the PHP vulnerability that basically had their whole infrastructure seized through Operation Kronos because of the NCA, that is, yes, they don't necessarily have blue teams. I wouldn't be surprised if they do have dedicated people that are looking at that, especially with the more like state-funded stuff. But they definitely have bug bounties. For example, Breach Forums had a bug bounty, and Blockbit had a bug bounty, like public bug bounties. Other groups have also like private, at least discussed bug bounties and rewards for that stuff on at a private level. But yes. Do you think ransomware would still have been a problem if cryptocurrency? So, like, if cryptocurrencies did not exist, yes, ransomware would still be an issue. Ransomware was an issue before cryptocurrency. We had in the 80s, there was ransomware was distributed by diskette. And so one of the first examples we have of that was basically this ransomware called AIDS, which was distributed at the World Health Organization in New York and at a conference, and you had to make the payment via PO box. Yeah, that was an actual thing that actually happened. You can read up on it. It's a fascinating story, and basically it was meant to bring awareness to the AIDS crisis that was happening in the early 90s, late 80s. Perfect. Let's go to Chad. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the Discord in about 5 minutes, and I will continue our conversation there. And if you want to interact and ask me questions, I'm going to be in the voice chat there and on the Flare Academy Discord. So thank you very much for attending here, and I'll answer more of the questions there as well. So if I didn't get the chance to answer your question, I'm sorry, but you can come and see me on the Flare Academy Discord, and I'd be more than happy to answer your question there. So I will see you all in a bit. Bye.